Have you ever noticed how some people seem to accomplish extraordinary things while doing almost nothing at all? They're not rushing, they're not overworking. They simply observe, wait, and move at the exact moment when everything aligns. And just like that, everything seems to fall perfectly into place for them. It's frustrating, right? While you're burning yourself out chasing every opportunity, they glide through life as if success is magnetically drawn to them. Now imagine if you could do the same. If instead of constantly pushing, forcing, and overworking, you learn to act with precision, to master the power of perfect timing. What would change in your life? Everything. Because the real game isn't about how much you do, it's about knowing when to do it. When you stop trying to win through sheer effort and start winning through intelligence and timing, the world starts to reveal its hidden patterns. The people who pride themselves on outworking everyone suddenly realize they never understood the deeper game at all. Machiavelli once said, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." Think about that. The difference between the two isn't effort, it's timing. While everyone else exhausts themselves chasing every lead, you're saving your energy for the one decisive move that makes everything else irrelevant. We've been programmed to believe that working harder automatically leads to better results, that grinding equals greatness. But here's the truth. Most of your effort is wasted because it's misdirected. You're fighting unnecessary battles, solving problems that would eventually solve themselves, and wasting your energy on things that don't actually move you closer to victory. This isn't about being lazy. It's about being lethal. It's about understanding what Machiavelli called strategic patience, the discipline of waiting for the right moment to strike rather than reacting to everything around you. The world glorifies busyness. We wear exhaustion like a badge of honor, as if our worth depends on how much we can cram into a single day. But if you take a closer look, you'll see that 90% of this activity is meaningless. Machiavelli saw this clearly in the courts of Renaissance Italy. The most powerful rulers weren't the ones constantly fighting or proving themselves. They were the ones who understood the art of restraint. They knew that conserving energy for the moments that mattered was far more powerful than reacting to every minor challenge. But somewhere along the way, we lost this wisdom. Today, we treat every message as urgent, every opportunity as essential, and every task as a must-do. We've confused availability with value, and that's the behavior of the reactive, not the strategic. Every time you scatter your attention, you drain your most valuable resource, your focus. When your mind is spread thin across 1,000 tiny obligations, you lose the force that could be directed towards something transformative. The truth is, people who try to do everything end up standing for nothing. They become replaceable. Because when you're available for everything, you're not indispensable for anything. The most successful people aren't those who do the most. They're the ones who choose what not to do. They pick their battles with surgical precision. Machiavelli wrote, "It is better to act and repent than not to act and regret." But he didn't mean constant, thoughtless activity. He meant taking decisive action at the right moment when the odds are on your side. There's a massive difference between movement and progress, between activity and achievement. Most people live in what could be called the activity trap, believing that motion equals momentum. But real productivity isn't about doing more. It's about doing what matters most. And sometimes what matters most is doing nothing until the timing is right. Think back to the last time you forced something, a deal, a relationship, an idea that wasn't ready. How much energy did you waste trying to make it work? Now compare that to a time when things seemed to just click, when you acted effortlessly and everything flowed naturally. That wasn't luck. That was alignment. That was timing. It's the difference between swimming against the current and reading the water before you dive in. Here's what most people don't understand. The market rewards scarcity, not abundance. When you make yourself constantly available, always online, always responding, You create the illusion that your time is cheap, and cheap things are never respected. The person replying to work emails at midnight doesn't look dedicated. They look like someone whose time has no boundaries. That's why Machiavelli emphasized mystery, never showing your full hand, keeping others guessing, maintaining an aura of control. When people can predict your every move, they stop respecting your time and your presence. You become common, replaceable, a commodity. The cruel irony is that the busiest people are often the least important. They mistake motion for meaning. But busyness is often just a way of avoiding stillness, a way to escape the discomfort of being strategic, of pausing long enough to think. Real power, on the other hand, comes from focus, from learning to do less but better. The leaders who shaped history, those who influenced entire empires, weren't constantly in motion. They spent far more time observing than acting. And when they did act, it was with devastating precision. If this message resonates with you so far, pause for a second, hit that like button and subscribe. Not because it's routine, but because it tells the algorithm that people like you still value deep thinking and timeless strategy over shallow productivity. Now, let's go deeper. Machiavelli's insights weren't just about politics, they were about human nature. He understood that most people live reactively. They respond to circumstances instead of shaping them. They let the world set the rhythm, and they just dance to it. But the few who rise above that noise are the ones who compose their own rhythm. They operate from strategy, not emotion. Most people act from impatience. They can't stand waiting. They chase every opportunity because they're afraid of missing out. But patience isn't passive. It's powerful. The people who seem lucky are often the ones who've been quietly positioning themselves, waiting for the right moment. While everyone else was busy reacting, they were preparing. That's what separates the reactive from the strategic. The reactive person fills every moment with meaningless action to feel in control. The strategic person knows that control doesn't come from constant doing. It comes from understanding, from seeing the whole board before making a move. In today's culture, we've turned busyness into a form of validation. We think if we're not grinding, we're not worthy of success. But this mindset traps you in endless motion without direction. Machiavelli observed this centuries ago. The rulers who were obsessed with proving their strength through constant warfare always fell first. They drained their resources fighting meaningless battles. Meanwhile, their wiser rivals quietly built alliances, conserved strength, and waited for the perfect opportunity to strike and win without exhaustion. That same pattern plays out in modern life. You don't have to be a prince or a politician to understand it. The person who reacts to every notification, every crisis, every demand, burns out. The person who waits, observes, and acts strategically wins. This is why stillness is essential to mastery. Stillness isn't inaction, it's awareness. It's the space where strategy takes shape. When you're always reacting, you're trapped on the surface of life, chasing waves instead of learning to ride them. But when you start practicing strategic patience, the first thing you'll feel is discomfort. You've been conditioned to measure your value by how busy you are. The moment you slow down, guilt creeps in, this nagging voice whispering that you're falling behind. But here's the secret. That discomfort isn't failure, it's withdrawal. You're detoxing from the addiction to busyness that's been quietly draining your power for years. Think about it. Most people don't even know what they're chasing anymore. They're just running toward validation, running from silence, running from themselves. But the moment you stop running, something powerful happens. Clarity begins to form. You start seeing patterns that were invisible before. You realize how much of your life has been spent reacting instead of creating. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He noticed that the greatest leaders weren't those who constantly charged forward. They were the ones who stepped back, observed, and calculated. They understood what he called the rhythm of fortune, the cyclical nature of opportunities. Fortune favors those who can read its rhythm. It punishes those who act blindly out of impatience. The same principle applies today. Strategic thinkers, whether in business, creativity, or personal life, don't chase every opportunity. They position themselves for the right one. They're not lazy, they're deliberate. Their stillness is not weakness, it's awareness. They're conserving energy so that when the right door opens, they can walk through it with full force while everyone else is still catching their breath. Let's talk about that energy. The more you scatter your attention, the weaker your influence becomes. Every unnecessary meeting, every meaningless task, every yes you didn't need to give, it all fragments your focus. And fragmented focus is powerless. The masters of any field understand concentration. They do less, but they do it with such clarity and precision that it changes the entire game. It's not about having endless energy. It's about channeling your limited energy toward the few moves that actually matter. When you live like this, something fascinating happens. The world starts treating you differently. Your time becomes valuable. Your words carry more weight. Because scarcity always creates value. When you're not constantly available, people start paying attention when you finally do show up. But this shift doesn't come easy. When you stop over-functioning, others will resist. They'll accuse you of being distant, selfish, or arrogant. Why? Because your old patterns benefited them. You were the one who always said yes. You were the one who picked up the slack. When you stop doing that, their comfort is threatened. Machiavelli warned that changing your own behavior always shifts the power dynamics around you. Some people will adapt. Others will fight to pull you back into old habits because your growth exposes their stagnation. That's when you must hold your ground. You need what he would call a sovereign mind, an inner authority that isn't easily swayed by guilt or pressure. This is not about becoming cold or detached. It's about becoming discerning. It's about realizing that not every battle is worth fighting, not every invitation deserves a yes, and not every conflict needs your attention. You begin to develop an instinct for what truly matters, and that instinct is what separates ordinary from extraordinary. Let's get practical. The first step in mastering this mindset is to separate what's urgent from what's important. Most people fail because they confuse the two. Urgent things scream for attention, but they rarely change your life. Important things are quieter. They build slowly, invisibly, but they're the foundation of lasting success. Machiavelli practiced what might be called strategic neglect. He ignored distractions, even when they seemed urgent, so he could focus on moves that shaped the bigger game. In your life, that might mean ignoring the flood of daily notifications to focus on a long-term vision. It might mean saying no to quick wins that don't serve your larger purpose. When you stop reacting to everything that feels urgent, you start noticing the larger patterns, the underlying forces that others are too busy to see. That's where real strategy lives. But here's the difficult part. When you slow down, you'll have to face what you've been avoiding. The silence will bring up uncomfortable thoughts, fears, insecurities, doubts, the fear of missing out, the fear of being forgotten, the fear of not being enough. And that's why most people stay busy. It's easier to drown those fears in noise and activity than to confront them directly. Yet, if you can sit through that discomfort, if you can resist the urge to fill every silence with motion, you'll gain something priceless: self-command, the ability to act from clarity instead of compulsion. One of the most powerful practices for developing this is what we could call strategic silence. Take periods of intentional withdrawal, not to escape the world, but to observe it more clearly. Step away from constant communication, stop responding instantly, and use that time to reconnect with what truly matters. This isn't isolation, it's incubation. Just as seeds grow in darkness before breaking through the soil, breakthroughs in life and strategy come from stillness. The challenge is that this goes directly against cultural conditioning. Society rewards visible effort, not quiet strength. It celebrates the appearance of busyness over the quality of results. That's why we live in a world full of exhausted people doing mediocre work at full speed. But the truth is, deep thinking requires space. Great decisions require silence. Powerful moves require patience. When you stop trying to do everything, something incredible happens. You start doing the right things naturally. You no longer need to prove your value through action. Your value becomes evident through your focus, your timing, your presence. And make no mistake, presence is power. The person who can sit calmly in uncertainty, who can resist the pressure to act prematurely, holds a kind of magnetic influence. While others rush to fill the void, you remain steady. That steadiness creates trust. It commands respect. But perhaps the hardest truth in all of this is realizing that your addiction to constant action has been a form of self-sabotage. It's a way to feel important while avoiding the deeper question, am I actually moving towards something meaningful? Machiavelli often analyzed why rulers failed, and the common thread was always the same. They confused activity with strategy. They fought too many battles, spread themselves too thin, and mistook noise for progress. The ones who endured were those who mastered restraint, who understood that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is wait. When you embrace this principle, your life begins to simplify. You stop chasing. You start attracting. You stop reacting. You start directing. And that's when the transformation happens. You begin to act not from fear or urgency, but from alignment. You realize that your worth has nothing to do with how much you produce, but with how accurately you move when it truly counts. Over time, the people around you start to notice. You're calmer, more precise, more effective. Some may not understand it, but the results speak louder than explanations. You no longer need to prove yourself through constant doing. Your results and your presence do it for you. That's what true mastery looks like. It's not about endless action. It's about perfect timing. It's not about controlling everything. It's about knowing what to control and when. And as Machiavelli taught, everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you truly are. The world might see you as calm, but beneath that calm is precision. Beneath that restraint is strategy. Beneath that stillness is power. So as you move forward, remember this. In a world addicted to motion, stillness is your greatest advantage. Strategic patience isn't just a mindset, it's a weapon. A quiet, unseen force that allows you to shape outcomes while others are too busy reacting to notice. Because in the end, true power doesn't come from doing more. It comes from doing less, but perfectly.